Welcome back to Vuln Vibes, listeners. Today, we're kicking off the new year with a deep dive into Oracle's January 2025 critical patch update. And let me tell you, Oracle really decided to start the year off with a bang.
Oh, yeah.
A bang of 318 security flaws, to be exact. 318.
It's
Oracle, you're trying to give us heart palpitations, aren't you?
it's a hefty update, that's for sure. And a reminder that, even giants like Oracle aren't immune to security vulnerabilities.
So our listeners who might not be fluent in Oracleese, can you give us a quick rundown of what this critical patch update, or CPU as you techie folks call it, actually means?
Sure. A CPU is essentially Oracle's way of saying, hey, we found some serious security holes in our products, and you really need to patch them ASAP.
Okay, so let's dive into the nitty-gritty. 318 is a pretty intimidating number. What are some of the standout vulnerabilities that have you security folks reaching for the antacids?
Well, the one that immediately jumps out is CVE-2025-21535. It affects Oracle's Agile Product Lifecycle Management Framework and has a CVSS score of 9.9. That's about as high as it gets.
Okay, 9.9 out of 10. That's like duck and cover levels of bad, right?
It's definitely one to take seriously. What makes this vulnerability particularly concerning is that it's relatively easy to exploit. It's the kind of flaw that could allow even someone with limited technical skills to potentially gain control of a vulnerable system.
So we're talking about someone potentially hijacking a company's entire project management system. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It's certainly a high-impact scenario, especially considering the sensitivity of the data, often managed within these systems. And what makes this even more alarming is that Oracle actually warned about active exploitation attempts, targeting a previous flaw in the same product back in November.
Wait, so attackers are already trying to break into systems using Agile. That's not exactly reassuring.
It goes to show that attackers are actively looking for ways to exploit these systems. And it highlights the importance of proactive patching. That previous vulnerability, CVE-2024-21287, wasn't quite as severe, but the fact that it was actively being exploited just emphasizes the need for vigilance.
So let me get this straight. We have a highly severe vulnerability in a widely used product that is relatively easy to exploit, and there's evidence that attackers are already trying to leverage similar flaws. Not a great combination.
You're catching on quickly, and keep in mind this is just one of 318 vulnerabilities in this update.
Oh boy. All right, well, before we move on to the next heart-stopping vulnerability, can we talk a bit more about what active exploitation actually means? It sounds pretty ominous.
It means that someone somewhere has figured out how to weaponize that vulnerability and is actively using it to attack systems in the real world.
Okay. That's definitely unsettling. It's like knowing there's a burglar trying to break into your house, but not knowing when or how they'll strike. So what else is lurking?
In this massive patch update, you mentioned 318 vulnerabilities. Surely there are other heavy hitters we should be aware of.
There are indeed. Another critical vulnerability that caught my attention is CVE-2025-21535. This one impacts Oracle WebLogic Server, and it bears a striking resemblance to CVE-2020-2883. Hold on, are we seeing a pattern here? Is Oracle releasing a greatest hits album of vulnerabilities?
It does seem like some familiar themes are cropping up. Both CVE 2025-21535 and CVE 2020-2883 could allow an attacker to execute arbitrary code on a vulnerable WebLogic server. That means they could potentially take complete control of the server and pretty much do whatever they want.
And you said this older vulnerability, CVE 2020-2883, was actively exploited. So we're not just talking about hypothetical risks here.
Exactly. In fact, just this month, the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, added CVE 2020-2883 to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. Because you guessed it, there's evidence of active exploitation in the wild.
Okay, this is getting a little too Groundhog Day for my liking. It's like we're seeing a repeat of past vulnerabilities, just with a new year attached.
It highlights a crucial point. Patching isn't a one-time fix, it's an ongoing process, and it's crucial for organizations to stay on top of these updates and address vulnerabilities promptly.
You're preaching to the choir here. All right, we've covered two major vulnerabilities, both with some pretty scary implications. But we're only at the tip of the iceberg here, right? What about the rest of this massive list? Any other big names we should be worried about?
Oh, there are plenty more where those came from. We've got a whole rogues gallery of critical vulnerabilities. With a CVSS score of 9.8 lurking in this update, we're talking about flaws in J.D. Edwards, business intelligence, and even Oracle's communications products.
So Oracle is really covering all their bases with this update, huh? It's like a vulnerability buffet. But let's break it down a bit. Can you give us some specific examples of these critical flaws and what they could mean for businesses.
Sure. Let's take CVE 2025-21524, for instance. This one affects JD Edwards Enterprise One tools, which many businesses use for crucial tasks, like financial management and supply chain planning. A successful exploit of this vulnerability could potentially lead to financial chaos and disruption of critical operations.
So we're talking about attackers potentially messing with a company's books or disrupting their supply chain. That sounds like a recipe for some serious headaches. What about those communications product flaws you mentioned?
Yes. One that stands out is CVE 2024-37371. This one involves Kerberos, a system used for authentication, verifying that you are who you say you are when you're accessing a network or service. This particular flaw in Oracle's implementation of Kerberos could allow an attacker to bypass authentication and gain unauthorized access to their communications products, like billing and revenue management.
So instead of just sneaking past the bouncer, this is like the attacker getting a hold of the master key to the entire club.
That's a good way to put it. This vulnerability could disrupt billing systems, potentially leading to financial losses and service disruptions.
This Kerberos issue, it's specific to Oracle products. Or is this a wider problem?
This particular vulnerability affects Oracle's implementation of Kerberos, but it highlights a broader point. Security is everyone's responsibility. Software developers need to build secure systems from the ground up, but users also need to be aware of vulnerabilities and apply patches promptly. It's a shared responsibility.
Couldn't agree more. It takes a village to keep our digital world safe. And speaking of villages, are there any vulnerabilities in this update that could impact the average user, not just large companies?
Well, Oracle also released a whopping 285 patches, 285 for Oracle Linux in this update.
They're really going all out this time.
It's a good reminder that security updates are crucial for all software, not just flashy enterprise products. Even your trusty Linux operating system needs some TLC every now and then.
TLC security patches. It's all about self-care, right? Okay, listeners, after hearing about all these critical vulnerabilities, I'm sure some of you are feeling a little overwhelmed. But don't worry, we're going to take a quick break and come back in part 2 to delve deeper into some of these specific vulnerabilities and discuss what you can do to protect yourselves. So grab a coffee, do some stretches, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
Welcome back to Vuln Vibes.
My brain is still reeling from that first batch. But hit me with your best shot. What other vulnerabilities should we be paying attention to?
Let's delve into CVE 2024-21535. This one targets Oracle Agile Engineering Data Management, software used to manage, well, engineering data, blueprints, designs, technical docs. It's all in there.
So basically, a hacker's dream if they want to steal trade secrets or sabotage a project.
That's a pretty accurate assessment. This vulnerability could give an attacker access to all that sensitive data. Imagine stolen designs, tampered projects, or even malicious code slipped into the software itself. It's a high-stakes scenario.
Speaking of high stakes, what about the flaw in Oracle Business Intelligence? CVE 2023-29824. This sounds like it could impact companies that rely heavily on data analytics for decision-making.
Absolutely. Oracle Business Intelligence Enterprise Edition is a powerful tool used by businesses for data analysis and informed decision-making. Marketing campaigns, financial forecasts, it all runs through these systems.
So if an attacker were to exploit this vulnerability, they could potentially manipulate data, steal confidential information, or even disrupt the entire platform. That's a lot of power in the wrong hands. Is there any good news in this patch update? I'm starting to feel like hiding under my desk might be the safest option.
The good news is that Oracle has, of course, released patches for all of these vulnerabilities. That's the silver lining of a critical patch update. It gives users a chance to fix the flaws before they become major incidents.
It's kind of like a fire drill for your software. Better to be prepared than to panic when the alarm bells start ringing.
I like that analogy. And just like with fire drill, the key is to act quickly and efficiently. Don't wait until it's too late.
I'm definitely feeling a sense of urgency now, but let's be realistic. With so many patches to apply, where do we even begin? It's like drinking from a fire hose.
Prioritization is key. Identify your most critical systems, the ones that would cause the most damage if compromised, and get those patched first.
So it's triage for your software, like dealing with the most life-threatening injuries first.
Exactly. Minimize the potential damage first, and then you can work your way down the list, patching other systems as quickly as possible.
Any tips for our listeners who might be feeling a bit overwhelmed by this whole process? It's easy to feel like you're drowning. You technical jargon and patch numbers.
Don't panic. Take a deep breath and approach this systematically. Start with a good inventory of your Oracle products and their versions. Then consult Oracle's documentation to identify the specific patches you need.
And remember, folks, you don't have to do this alone. Lean on your IT department or a trusted tech friend if needed. There's no shame in asking for help. When it comes to cybersecurity,
Absolutely. There are also plenty of resources available online. Forums and support groups can offer advice and a sense of community. We're all in this together.
speaking of community, we've got a great one right here at Vuln Vibes. Don't hesitate to reach out in the comments if you have any questions. But beyond patching, are there any other proactive steps listeners can take to stay safe?
Staying informed is crucial. Keep an eye on security news and advisories from reputable sources like Oracle, CISA, and of course, Vuln Vibes.
Okay, that's the second shameless plug of the day.
Yeah.
But hey, it's true. Staying informed is half the battle. Now, before we move on, you mentioned something earlier about supply chain security. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. One vulnerability in this update, CVE-2025-21535, highlights the importance of supply chain security. This one affects the Apache ActiveMQ component of the Oracle Communications Diameter Signaling Router.
Vaguely rings a bell. It was on that very long list. Of 9.8 CVSS scores, what makes this one so special?
What makes this one interesting is that Apache ActiveMQ is open source software, meaning it's developed and maintained by a community of volunteers, rather than a single company. This vulnerability showcases how even widely used, open source components can have flaws that impact commercial products like Oracle's.
So it's like a domino effect.
Oh my
One weak link can bring down the entire chain.
Exactly. And that's why supply chain security is so crucial. We tend to focus on securing our own systems, but we also need to be aware of the security practices of our vendors and suppliers. Their vulnerabilities can easily become our vulnerabilities.
It's like realizing your home security system is only as good as your neighbor's. It adds a whole other layer of complexity to cybersecurity. No wonder you security folks always look so stressed.
It's a challenging field, constantly evolving. There's always something new to learn and new threats to analyze. But it's also incredibly rewarding to be on the front lines, protecting businesses and individuals from cyber attacks.
You're making it sound almost glamorous. But you've raised a good point. This episode has been heavy on the technical details. But how does all of this translate to the average listener's everyday life? How can we stay safe in a world where software seems to have more holes than Swiss cheese? We'll be back after a short break to tackle those questions. Welcome back to Vuln Vibe listeners. We've explored the dark depths of Oracle's January 2025 critical patch update. But now it's time to shed some light on what this all means for you, the average user, indeed navigating the digital world.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who might not be cybersecurity experts, but still want to stay safe online, what's the key takeaway from all of this? The first step is awareness. You don't need to understand the technical intricacies of every vulnerability, but it's crucial to be aware that these threats exist. Stay informed about security news from reputable sources like Oracle, CAZ, and of course, Vuln Vibes. Subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell, folks. But seriously, staying informed is half the battle. What else can our listeners do to bolster their digital defenses?
Next up is patching. I know it can seem like a chore, but keeping your software up to date is crucial. Those updates often contain security patches that can protect you from known vulnerabilities.
It's like a digital flu shot. A little inconvenience now can save you from a major headache later. But let's be realistic. Not everyone is a tech whiz. What advice do you have for those who might feel intimidated by the patching process?
Don't be afraid to ask for help. If you're not comfortable updating your software yourself, reach out to your IT department, a tech-savvy friend, or even your software vendor support team. There's no shame in seeking assistance, and it's always better to be safe than sorry.
It's like asking for directions when you're lost. It might feel awkward, but it's better than wandering around aimlessly in a digital wasteland. Any other pearls of wisdom to share before we wrap up?
Be mindful of what you click and download. Phishing emails, malicious websites, infected downloads. These are all common ways attackers exploit vulnerabilities. Think before you click. Double-check email senders, and only download software from trusted sources.
It's like that old adage, look both ways before crossing the street. But for the digital age, any final words of wisdom from our resident security guru?
Remember that cybersecurity is a journey, not a destination. It's an ongoing process of learning, adapting, and evolving as the threat landscape changes. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and don't hesitate to ask for help when you need it. Ultimately, their online security is in your hands.
Well said, and on that note, it's time to wrap up this episode of Vuln Vibes. A huge thank you to our expert for guiding us through this Oracle Patch Appalooza. And to our amazing listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of cybersecurity. Remember to subscribe for more insights, analysis, and of course a healthy dose of humor to keep things interesting. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and keep those patches coming.